Hey, what's up? Today in our What is Love series, we are talking about commitment and conflict. And for me, I believe this is a pretty big deal for most students and most people in this. I remember when I was in high school and college, I always said the first girl who makes it past 3 months in a relationship with me was going to be the girl that I was going to marry. And boy, guess what? Katie was the first one to make it past 3 months. So, my theory proved true for me. Now, that's obviously not the case for everyone, but that kind of points to the fact that I had commitment problems, and I know many of you struggle with commitment as well, and it's something that we really need to learn how to work through, because what typically happens for us inside of relationships is that we have conflict. Conflict is something that happens. Maybe it's a argument, or maybe you get annoyed with somebody, or maybe they did something that you don't like. So what ends up happening is we have this bit of conflict, and then we split. And now, sometimes that's okay. Like, I'm not saying that you need to marry whoever you were dating in high school. No, that's excessive, and we don't necessarily want to do that. But as time goes on, and as you are looking towards marriage, it's really important to learn how to go through conflict so you can stay committed inside of marriage, and also those relationships that are leading towards marriage. Commitment is something that's really hard for this gen right now, because if you look at statistically, I'm looking at it right now, that in 2020, 50% of marriages end in divorce. Which then makes me realize that of the people that are watching this right now, if you add in siblings and all that, over half of you have a situation where you have divorced parents. And I gotta say that breaks my heart. I hate that for you. I haven't experienced that, but I've talked to so many students and so many people who have, and it's a really challenging thing to go through. I know that, so I empathize with you, and I hurt for you. And with that, I also want you to know that that's not God's design for marriage. He designed marriage as an everlasting covenant that's between you and them and God, that you are honoring God through this everlasting covenant that you've made with somebody else. And it says this in Matthew 5:32. It says, "But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful," that's important to note, "causes her to commit adultery." This is saying that divorce, unless it's due to sexual immorality, abuse, or an unbelieving spouse, is what another scripture says. It's a sin. Divorce is a sin. So that's not what God wants, and that's not what God desires for you to go through as a kid, but also for you to go through when you are actually married. So if that's the case, what do we do? Because if 50% of marriages end in divorce, that's a really high rate, and it feels like, how can I even begin to be successful? Because that sure does seem absolutely impossible to do. We need to work through conflict and towards commitment. And this will not only help you out right now with your high school relationships, your middle school relationships, but it will also help you with your friendships, because let's be honest, we have some commitment issues there as well. And it will also help you out in your future with your marriage. So, because the focus verse I want to focus on today is 1 Corinthians 7:17. It says, "Each of you should continue to live in whatever situation the Lord has placed you, and remained as you were when God first called you. This is my rule for all the churches." Paul right there is writing and telling his people to remain committed. So what do we do to do that? So if we know that's something we need to do, what do we do to do that? The first thing we need to do, I'm going to give you 3 quick things, okay? First thing we need to do is we need to create a safe space for conflict. Going back to the beginning of this chapter in 1 Corinthians 7:1, Paul wrote this: "Now regarding the questions you asked in your letter." You see that? Paul had created a safe space where his people could ask him questions so he could help them out. He created a safe place for conflict to occur. And I got to say, you won't stay committed if you can't work through conflict. It will not happen. Because guess what? conflict is going to happen. So what we have to do, instead of running away from conflict, instead of hiding from conflict, we have to create a safe space for it. Because in that relationship that you have, they aren't going to text you back. They are going to be busy at times. They will lie and mess up. They will say something that you don't like. You are going to get annoyed with each other. Someone is going to forget an important date. You might even get ghosted for a couple of days. So you have to create a safe space to work through that conflict. So my challenge for you is, starting today if you're in a relationship, or if you're going to get into a relationship soon or in the future, create a space for that. And the way you do that is starting your relationship or starting today and having an open conversation about it. Saying, hey, I know there's going to be problems in our relationship. So what I want to do is, if we need to do something about it, we need to just talk it through. That you can be open, that you can be honest with each other, because you want the relationship to be the best it possibly can be, rather than hiding in the shadows of hurt and pain. I really believe you can't get through it if you don't allow space to grow through it. Remember, for this series, we are talking about grace and truth. The growth happens in the tension in the middle. We have the exercise band that we talked about. You have grace and truth. And as you pull it and there's tension right here in the middle, as you pull it and there's tension in the middle, that's where the growth occurs, because that's where you're stretching each other out. And that tension can be tough, and it can be a tough spot. But it's the spot that where growth happens, and it's also a safe spot, because you're looking out for the best of you and the other people that are involved. The second thing you want to do is communicate. You have to communicate. Now, this is a challenge when it comes to relationships, because phrases like "I'm fine" rule the world when you ask what is wrong. And boys, let me tell you something. If a girl says they are fine or it's fine, that's a lie. That they are not fine. It is not fine. Something's the matter, okay? And girls, conversely, let me say this to you. If a boy says I'm good or it's good, it's not good and they aren't good, okay? So we have these code words to hide how we're actually feeling. And that's the problem right there. That's why communication is really hard. Because we are trying to hide our problems. It's terrible communication. If something's actually wrong, let people know. We can't read minds. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what's going on in your brain. Let people know. So if you're willing to communicate what's wrong, it's going to help. Because if you aren't willing to communicate what's wrong, then you won't be able to fix it to make it right. You know what I'm saying? Like, someone can't fix a problem they don't know is there. Ephesians 4:25. This is Paul writing to another group of people. He says this: so stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body. Paul's saying we got to tell the truth. We need to increase our communication. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have things that you need to fix. It's okay to be working through stuff. I promise that will happen. My marriage isn't perfect, but the more me and Katie communicate, the better we become as a couple, as a married couple, and we work to something better to honor God more. What's not okay is when you store up problems on the inside. Because when you store up problems on the inside, you actually create more problems on the outside. But you have to make sure you do it with grace. Ephesians 4:29, a couple of verses after the tell the truth verse, it says this: don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. When you're telling people what's wrong, don't attack them. Don't say mean things. Don't be abusive with your language. Do it to make both of you better. Make sure you are doing it in a helpful way and not a hurtful way. And the way you make it helpful is not make it an argument, but you make it a conversation so that we can dialogue back and forth to fix the problem. And the third one, this one's crazy: commit. This is the key, because if you aren't willing to actually commit, guess what? You will not commit. It's too hard. So today, make a decision in your relationships that you are going to commit to doing what's best for the relationship and your honoring of God. Does that mean you're going to marry the person you're dating? No. Probably not. But don't let the reason you're not marrying the person that you're dating be a reason because you can't get through conflict. You see what I'm saying there? Don't make conflict the issue. Make the issue the actual issue. But don't let small little things that don't actually matter when you're trying to conflict through it and you're afraid of the conflict stop you from being committed to the relationship. Because that's something you're going to have to learn to work through inside of your marriage once you get there. So what do we do now? What do we do as we wrap up? Well, you might still feel confused, and that's okay. The biggest thing you do, and you're going to talk about this in your small groups quite a bit, look towards Jesus and his relationship with us. If you really want to know about commitment, look towards Jesus and his relationship with us. He gives us truth. He tells us when we mess up, that we aren't perfect, that we are actually in conflict with God. Yet, Jesus also gives us grace, that we can come back to him, that we can be in relationship with him, that we can spend our entire lives with him. That right there is commitment through conflict. And if you really want to have successful relationships, start with living through that commitment and giving your life to Jesus in that way, and then apply it to your relationships. Because the more you learn from Jesus that way, the better your relationships are going to be from a mentality standpoint. You'll understand really how to be committed through conflict and know when it's a right relationship and it's a wrong relationship. I hope you had a great video. Thank you guys for joining us today. We'll catch you guys another time.